So my name is Megan Bowden. I'm a ranger based with National Parks at Tumut, and we're talking about the Linesmans Huts No.3. They're both known as Linesmans Huts No.3, but yeah, there's two huts there. They're about 20 kilometres south of Cabramatta, up on 15 Mile Ridge, and about 20 k's west of the last hut we built, which is Happy's Hut. The Skillion Hut was moved there about 1969, and the Snow Hut was moved there in 1982. But they were very important for the construction and the maintenance of the Snowy Mountains scheme. So the Snowy Mountains hydroelectric scheme started about 1949, took about 25 years to build, and consisted of 16 major dams, 7 power stations, a pumping station, about over 145 kilometres of tunnels underground, and I think that's 80 kilometres of aqueducts, and was considered at the time one of the greatest engineering feats of the 20th century. And for that scheme to work, we needed power lines, and the Linesman's huts were built and moved into position to help for the construction and maintenance of these power lines. And the power line associated with 15 Mile Ridge connected Tumut Dam to the power grid at Cabramatta. And the maintenance of that power line was very challenging, because basically extreme weather used to build up snow and ice on these lines and poles, and meant that they would bring them down. And so once the lanes came down, power was disconnected to Tumut Dam, and the power couldn't get going again until those lines were put back up. So the job of the power line operators were very important to keep these power lines up and going. The gable hut was moved there in 1969 and was thought to have been built by the Italian electrical power transmission company or Transfield, and they were contracted to the Snowy scheme to build the power lines. And the Skillion Hut was actually moved there in 1982, so it was later, and it was known by the Snowy workers as the Snow Hut. And these again were temporary transportable buildings meant to be moved around and used as temporary shelter for the workers when they were working on different areas and as part of the scheme. So after the fires, we went and recorded what was left of the huts, and unfortunately, yes, most of it was just all that was left was some stone footings and some metal and things like that. So we moved the location of the hut just a bit to the east, and you can still see the location of where the old hut was. There's still power poles, you can see where the line went, and still find insulators near the area. So you can still see that connection of the linesmen who valiantly tried to keep those lines going during the winter months. Yeah. Where these huts are located up on 15 Mile Ridge as being very well as being home to the rare mountain pygmy possum, Australia's only hibernating mammal. It has a lot of bogs which are very sensitive, and so driving through these bogs would basically disturb these bogs and drain them, as well as often we get stuck. So we had to look at ways to try and get the huts in and with the least amount of impact to these areas. The site's also in the middle of our hawkweed program. We have an intensive weed control program for the orange hawkweed, so we had to try and restrict the amount of vehicle and equipment being taken into that area. So use of helicopters was considered to be the best way to do it. So we decided we'd build them off-site like they were originally, and then fly them into position. It was an interesting design when you sort of try and talk to people. Well, we want to fly something into an area, and they say, oh yes, what is it? It's a hut, and they look at you funny. But yes, so we had to look at ways to try and design the skids and the frame to be able to withstand being lifted up and flown into location. So there was a lot of looking at the engineering of skids to be able to be strong enough but not too heavy to impact the weight of the hut itself. So these huts were built in our sheds down here at Tumut, and had to be built to up to 900 kilos weight, because that was the weight a helicopter could lift it into site. We were able to use our local Roddy Engineering to help design and build the skids that the helicopter would need to hook up to lift the huts into position. So the huts were built in the shed here in Tumut, and then loaded onto a tilt tray and taken up to position, and then lifted in by our National Parks air crew, who carefully designed the rigging and the spreader bars so you didn't crunch the walls to be able to lift it into position. Yes, so when looking at trying to fly the huts in, there was a lot of liaison going on between Roddy's Engineering, our flight section, pulling in local staff from Cancoban area, and our builders Roger and Peter. So trying to design a structure that was going to be rigid enough to be able to lift it in position, as well as the skids had to be strong enough to lift that weight, but not too heavy to impact the final weight of the final structure. So all that sort of had to come together, and then working with our flight section for them to come down to program them time in, and looking at the weather to make sure that it wasn't going to be too windy for the lift on the day. So because it's very exposed, any wind would have made lifting and very challenging and quite dangerous. So it all had to come together on the day, and luckily it did, and we were able to lift those 2 huts into position onto site. So within a couple of millimetres of where we wanted them. So yeah, it was quite good to see that it all went well. Yes, look, 15 Mile Ridge has got one of the best views of Jagungal in the mountain. It's just spectacular, but it is very exposed. You're up high, you're about the same altitude of Perisher Valley, so yes, cops all the wind and the snow when it comes through from the northwest. It was like being blasted with a sandblaster, so the buildings needed painting every year. Yes, it certainly copped a lot of weathering. It's the design of the hut. We had to look at ways to try and replicate what the hut looked like, but enabled it to withstand weather and reduce the maintenance of this building. So we actually looked at cladding it in colour bond, so it won't need that ongoing painting every year. So it still looks similar to what it did before, but it will be a lot less maintenance hungry than the last huts. Roger and Peter were up there cladding the hut, often again in some very windy and wild weather, trying to hold on to iron to put it onto the hut. And then we had the help of the local caretaker group. So the program's involved a lot of help from volunteers from the Kosciuszko Hut Association, and Linesman in particular. We'd like to give a big thanks to the Tumut District Bushwalkers for their help in this program. And they were able to come and help me paint the inside of the huts. So we're hoping to have an opening for these huts in early May, and then the huts will be available for people to use as a visitor destination or for emergency shelter. So their location is in a great position, just off the Tumut Road. You can walk or ride into along Happy Jacks Road and up onto 15 Mile Ridge to use these as a nice lunch spot or camp nearby for amazing view of Jagungal. So it's a great location for walking or riding in that area. Yeah, so these 11 huts are part of the over 60 huts we have in what is now known as Kosciuszko National Park. And they're significant because they are like living museums. They tell of the previous land use of what is now Kosciuszko, as well as how they've been built, whether they've been built out of stone or timber, whatever local resources they had nearby. But as well as they tell the stories of the many families who've lived and used and worked in these places and their descendants. And that's why we've rebuilt them. So even though the fabric is gone, the social connections, those people connections, are still really important. So families of those people can still come back and tell their stories of their family when they were living or working or using the huts now for recreation and caretaking them. So we've got many groups who've been involved in helping our national parks with maintaining these huts. So working with our national park staff to make sure we can keep these buildings up for another 100 years.